Okay, let's start working on the core functionality of the app, which is the voting system. We'll start with the database structure and the relationship between our models, and then we'll work on showing the correct number of votes for our ideas. In the next videos, we'll work on the actual voting functionality when we click on this vote button. So let's start with a vote model and the migrations. So PHP artisan make model vote, and let's just generate everything for now. So let's set up our migration first. So let's go to create votes table. And this table will store all of our votes for the users and the ideas. So we only need two fields here. That's the user ID and the idea ID. So I'm going to try to stick to Laravel conventions and put them in alphabetical order, but you don't have to do that. So say foreign ID, and the first one is idea ID, but you can put user ID if you want first. And say constraints, so this will look for the ideas table. And then the next one is our user ID, and this will look for a user in the users table. So if you think about it, one row in this table should represent one vote in our system. So a user ID 1 and an idea ID 1, that means that user liked that idea. So again, if you think about it, it wouldn't make sense to have duplicate rows, because that would mean that user liked that idea twice, which doesn't make sense in our system. So we should enforce that the combination of idea ID and user ID should be unique. So we can do that using table unique, and we can just say the combination of idea ID and user ID, like I just said. And this will enforce data integrity within our database, which is a good thing. So let's save that. Let's migrate fresh seed, and let's take a look at our database. And there should be a new table here called votes. And we have these two rows, or sorry, these two fields. And let's just add something in here for now. Let's say 1 and 1. So like I just said, this represents one vote in our system. This user voted for this idea. So if I try to add another row with the same user ID and the same idea ID, that should result in an error because of the constraint we put. And there it is, duplicate key. Okay, so now I just want to rework our database seeder so we have a bunch of voting information when we're doing testing. So I am going to change a few things in my factories and my seeders. So let's start with the idea factory. Before, I'm just making a new user for each new idea, and I don't want that. So I'm going to change this to a number between 1 and 20, and I'll make sure I'll always have 20 users when I'm seeding the database. So let's go to our database seeder, and let's make a few changes here. So first, I am going to create 20 users. So say user factory. Actually, I'm going to put one for myself, so I don't have to keep creating users when I'm trying to log in. So say name me, and let's put my real email here so I can see that Gravatar is working. And then I'll make 19 other users here, so we have a total of 20. So we can just say user factory 19 create. Okay, so now we should have 20 users, and I'm going to create 100 ideas here instead of 30. Okay, so some of our tests might not pass anymore because of the change on the idea factory, so let's fix that first. So let's look at our tests. So let's run the create idea test, see if this one's still okay. And it is. Gravatar test should be fine. Okay, so it looks like just the show ideas test we have to make changes to. Okay, so we just have to create users manually and assign them here when we're creating new ideas. So let's just grab all the idea factories. So I'm just going to use multiple cursors here. Okay, and I believe that's it. And let's just say user ID is user ID. And we'll create a user up here. Okay, say user is user factory create. And let's make sure to import user. And let's add this wherever there's a idea factory. Okay, so idea factory, that's fine. Let's add it here. Okay, let's add it here. And I believe there's one more. And that's it. So let's run this again. Hopefully tests are passing again. And they are. Cool. Okay, so now back to our seeder. So the only thing I want to do is have a bunch of data for our votes table here. So I don't have to keep creating new entries here when I'm trying to test the new functionality. So let's do that here. Let's put a comment, say generate unique votes. Say ensure idea ID and user ID are unique for each row. Okay. So I'm just going to do it using 2 for loops here. It's probably a better way to do it functionally, but I'm just going to use 2 for loops like I said. So say for each, I'm going to use range 1 to 20 because we have 20 users. And we'll reference that as user ID. And let's make another for each. And same thing, but now we're looping over the ideas. So that's 1 to 100 as idea ID. And for each of these ideas, I want to add a vote for them. So we can use the vote factory. Actually, I didn't add that yet, so let's do that. Actually, let me finish writing this first. Vote factory create. And I just want to have user ID to be the user ID, this, and the idea ID to be the idea ID. Okay. And this should generate, let me import this. This should generate 100 times 20 entries in our votes table. So let's make sure we have something in our vote factory. We're not going to actually make use of this. I just want to have, I mean, we are going to make use of it, but every time we do, we're going to make sure we add our own idea ID and our own user ID. But let's just put it here just in case. So let's just say this faker number between, so this is 1 and 100. And for the user, let's say 1 and 20. Okay, so back to our seeder. So each user is going to generate a vote for every single idea. Now I don't want each user to vote for every single idea, so let's add a conditional here. Let's say if, let's just add votes for the ideas that have an ID that are even. Just so we don't vote for every single idea. So if idea ID mod 2 is 0, then vote for it. So only if it's even. Okay, so now instead of 2,000 votes, we should have 1,000. So let's run this, migrate fresh seed. Okay, so there's no database errors, so we know each row is unique, so I did that correctly. And let's check our votes table, and now we have 1,000 rows. So each user should have voted for 50 different ideas. So we can verify that by just looking for a user. Okay, and you see 50 rows here. And each idea should be voted for 20 times. So again, any idea that's even, because that's what I did for my code. Okay, so we have 20. Okay, so now we can actually work on the app in the browser. So for this video, I just want to show the number of votes, and they show up here in the index page and also on the show page. And this doesn't show because I have to refresh. So this and this. Okay, so let's start with the show page because that's a bit easier. So since I know I'm going to use Livewire for these components when we work on the vote component, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this whole thing in a Livewire component, and same for this container in the index page. So let's do that first. So that would be in the show blade. So we have a buttons container, and I believe that's this. And we also have an idea container. So let's verify that. So that's the buttons container. Where does it start? It starts right there. We also have this idea container. So they are sibling elements, and usually for Livewire components, you want one root div or one root element. So let's wrap this. Let's say div buttons or idea and buttons container. Okay. And let's go all the way down here after our buttons container. So let me scroll down. So this should be it. Let me indent that and close that div. And let's put a comment here. And idea and button container. Okay. And let's grab the whole thing. Hopefully I didn't mess that up and it looks correct. Let's cut it out. Didn't take the comment, but that's fine. And let's make a new Livewire component. So Livewire, I'm going to call it idea show. And the one on the index page will be called idea index. So idea show, we're going to pass in some information here, but for now we'll just render out what we had here. So let's go ahead and make that Livewire component. PHP artisan Livewire make idea show. Okay, cool. Let's go to idea show. Let's paste that in. Okay, and let's see if it still renders. And it doesn't because we have to pass in the idea. So let's go ahead and do that. So here, let's pass in the idea. So idea, sorry, it's colon equals idea. And I believe I don't even have to use the mount method. Okay, maybe I do. So let's go to our idea show class. And let's pass in that idea. So let's say public idea. Let's make a mount method, which is pretty much a constructor. And let's pass that in idea. Let's import idea and say this idea is idea. Okay, so does that work? Okay, so that works. And I'm also going to pass in a second parameter to the constructor or to the mount method, and that's going to be the vote count. Now you can get the vote count directly from the idea, but later on when we make the vote count dynamic, when we hit the vote button, it's a bit easier to update the vote count when it's just passed in as a variable. So let's say votes count or vote count, whatever you want. Okay. And let's add a public variable, votes count. And this votes count is votes count. Okay. So if you save that, we have to pass that in our show blade. So let's say votes count. And for now, let's just pass in whatever here. So say 5. Okay. And we might as well just use that variable being passed in the actual template here, or in the actual Livewire view. So let's go to idea show. And we have it in 2 places actually, because if you remember, we have here, and we also have it in a responsive version. So right here. So in this case, we have it here. So let's say votes count. Okay. And we also have it somewhere else, 12 right here. Okay, pass that in, and that should be 5 now because I hard-coded 5, and it is. Okay, so I forgot to set up our belongs to many relationship, so let's do that now. So let's go to user, and down here, let's set up a new method, or right here. Let's say votes. And this will return a belongs to many relationship, belongs to many, and it's to idea class, and the table is votes. So if we were to say user votes, it would give us a collection of all the ideas that the user voted for. So we can also add this or something similar to the idea class. Same method name. Let's put it after this. But we can change this to user. So this would be a list of users that voted for this particular idea. Okay. So now in our idea controller, for the show method, we can pass in the votes count here as well. Or we can grab it from the idea, but I'm going to pass it like this. So votes count is, so we have an idea. So idea, you can do votes like this, and we can just call count on it. And that should give us the count of the votes based on this idea. So now instead of hard coding that 5 in our show here, we can do votes count. And that should be correct. So like I showed you earlier, based on the seed data that we have here, it should be 20 if the ID is an even ID. So I'm not sure if this is even. It is. And it is 20. So that does work. So if we were to go to one that has an odd ID, maybe this one's odd, it should be 0, and it is. So every other one is 20 and 0. This one should be 20, and it seems to be working. Cool. So let's go back to this one. And it's important to know the difference between, let's go back to our controller, idea votes as a method, or idea votes as a field like this. So this should still work. If I save that, should still be 20. But if you look at the number of models, that went up to 24. So let's put it back to 20. I mean to votes as a method. You'll see it 4. But if it's votes as a field, you'll see it increase to 24. So the easiest way to see the difference between them is just to die and dump it. So let's die and dump idea votes as a field. And you'll see this is a list of users that voted for this particular idea. And there we go. We have 20 users that voted for this idea. So we're loading 20 users into memory and then counting them. So in this case, it's only 20 users, so it's not that much. But you can imagine if this idea had several votes, say a few thousand, then it's going to load however many users voted for this idea. So whatever thousand, however many thousand people, and then count them. But all we want is the actual count, so the actual number. So yeah, it doesn't make sense to load in the users into memory when we just want the count. So when we die and dump idea votes, this is not a collection of users, but a belongs to many relationship. So when we call count on this, this operation is being done on the database layer, which is much more performant. So yeah, make sure to use the correct method. Okay, so let's refresh. And I don't think I checked if the mobile version is showing the correct number of votes. So let's make sure it is. Okay, so it does. And let's add one more to the database to make sure the votes count is working. So this is the last vote, I believe, or the last idea, I mean. So let's go to our database. Should be this idea, and it is. Let's make sure it is. Okay, so that's idea ID 100. Okay, so let's add one more there to make sure it goes up to 21. So idea ID is 100. Actually, that's not going to work because there's going to be a duplicate. So let's go with 99 because that one is not even, and say user ID 1. So this shouldn't be in the database. So this should be added. Okay. As you see, we have 1001 now. And if I go back here, this one should have 1 vote now. And it does. Cool. So now let's work on the index page here. This is still hard coded. So let's make sure that that is working correctly. So if we go into our idea controller, you'll see that we have the index method here, and we're passing through the ideas and we're eager loading the relationships. So how do we get the vote count for each of these ideas? So one way would be to just grab it from the idea itself. So just like how we did it in the show method here. So idea votes count for each idea. So that would be in the index page. So let's go to that. And I'm going to put this in a Livewire component as well, but let me just show you what I'm talking about. So let's look for 12. Start with this one. And if I were to do idea votes count, that would work. So let's put that in. And before I refresh, take note of the number of queries we're doing, so 4. And now we're up to 14, but it does work. So again, we have the n+1 issue here, because for each idea here, we are performing another query. So again, we want to do something similar to the eager loads we're doing here, but with the vote count. So how do we do that? So Laravel actually provides that functionality with a with count function. So let's see if that can work for us. And then we'll move this to a Livewire component. So let's put this back. Okay, and pretty straightforward. We can just do with count votes, and should be in quotes. Let's see if this works for us. Actually, can we actually die and dump this like this? Or do I have to put it in a variable? Let's see if I can die and dump it so I can show you what I'm trying to do here. Okay, so it does work. It's a paginator though. Let me just change this to get for now so I can show you what I'm trying to do. Okay, so now we get the 100 ideas, but now each one of these ideas has a vote count associated with it. So we should no longer have that n+1 issue because they appear here. So it's not showing because I think there's too many ideas. So let me just like take 5 or something. Okay, try that again. And we have to run get on this. Sorry about that. Okay, so now we have a collection, but each idea should have a votes count. So where is it? Is it in attributes? Right there, votes count. So this did not exist before because we didn't call with votes or with count votes. So if I remove this, then we won't get that votes count field. So as you see, there's only 9 fields and there's no votes count. So I hope that makes sense. Actually performs a subquery, which we will do in the next video. So let's put this all back. Let's remove the die and dump. And now we can make use of the votes count, which should be on the idea directly. So let's go back to our index and let's say idea votes count. So we can do idea votes count. And we can put this on the other one as well. So let me grab this. Let's look for the 12. There it is. Put that in there. And now this should work. And the number of queries should stay low, and it does. This works, 21. The rest should be 20, 0. Okay. And everything is working. Cool. Okay, so let's move this into its own Livewire component like we did for the idea show. So let's do that. So that would be, I believe I have it in an idea container. So yeah, this whole div here. So let's grab this, cut it out. And the comment didn't go with it, but that's fine. Let's say Livewire idea index is what I'll call it. We have to pass in some data. So let me just close it down here. And let's make that Livewire make idea index. Okay. Let's go back, idea index. So pretty much the same thing. Actually, let me paste in the markup first. Okay, let's reindent. And there is one root div here, so that should be okay. Let's pass in the data. Actually, let's do votes count here instead of idea votes count, because I'm going to pass that in as well. Let's say votes count. Okay. Back to idea index. And it should be pretty much the same thing. So I'm just going to copy it from idea show. let's grab, actually everything should be the same. Okay, import, and does this work? Oh, we have to pass in the information. So let's say idea, and the votes count is idea votes count underscore count. Okay, so did I do everything correctly? Looks like I did, but now it's a Livewire component. Cool. You can even see that the bug bar shows how many Livewire components there are on the page. As you can see, we have 10, and it shows 10 here. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, I did want to do testing in this video, but my explanation took longer than I expected, so we'll do it in the next video. So one more thing I want to do here is just format this the same way that I formatted it on the index page. So just put it on its own line. Okay, so that looks good to me. Let's go ahead and run our tests to make sure I didn't break anything else. Parallel. Okay, everything else looks good. So let's make a commit here. Okay. Episode 17, git add, git commit, episode 17. It's a voting database structure.